Thank you for tuning in this week. I'm going to be straight with you guys. I'm a conservative. I vote Republican. I believe in limited government, lower taxes, personal responsibility, and individual freedom. That's why I moved to Tennessee. That's why I support the Republican Party. Because they're supposed to stand for those principles. But right now, Republicans in the Tennessee General Assembly are doing some of the most backwards, leftist, big government nonsense I've ever seen in my 44 and a half years. And I'm not going to stay silent about it just because they have an R next to their name. There's a constitutional amendment headed to the ballot in November 2026, SJR 1 and HJR 81. It's being sold as a ban on state property taxes. That sounds freaking great, right? Who doesn't want to ban taxes? Except Tennessee hasn't had a state property tax since 1949. We're putting something in our Constitution to ban a tax that doesn't exist and hasn't existed for 75 years. So why are they doing this? Political theater. Optics. They get to campaign on being tax fighters. While the real purpose of this amendment is to set up the biggest tax shell game Tennessee has ever seen. Because here's what they're not telling you. When you cap or ban one form of taxation, the government doesn't just stop spending. They shift the burden. They find other ways to take your money. And those other ways are going to hit you harder, cost you more, and give you less control than the system we have now. This same legislature that passed the forced blood draw DUI law we talked about last week or the week before. The same politicians who are building infrastructure to turn law enforcement into a revenue collection agency. The same people who are proposing to tax services, raise wheel taxes, and jack up every fee and fine that they can find. And they're doing it all while calling themselves conservatives. Well, claiming they're fighting for limited government and lower taxes. It's a lie. It's a shell game, and Tennessee voters need to see it for what it is before we make it permanent in our Constitution. If I wanted to be taxed to death, arrested for using prescribed medication, suppressed and controlled by an ever-growing government bureaucracy, I would vote for Democrats and move back to New York. But these Republicans are governing like radical leftists, and I'm done pretending otherwise. This episode is about the property tax amendment, the revenue shifting scheme it enables, and why every Tennessean, conservative, liberal, independent, needs to vote no in November to stop this disaster before it's too late.
Courage, compassion, faith, freedom, truth. Welcome to Courage in the Darkness with your host, Philip Roberts. It's time to awaken America.
Let me explain exactly what's happening with this property tax amendment and why it's one of the most dishonest pieces of legislation I've seen in years. The amendment SJR 1 and HJR 81 proposes to ban the state of Tennessee from levying a property tax. Politicians are selling this as a taxpayer protection measure. They're telling you they're enshrining limited government in the Constitution. They're claiming They're fighting for you against big government. It's all a lie. Tennessee eliminated its state property tax in 1949. We haven't had one for 75 years. This amendment isn't protecting you from anything that exists. It's not solving a problem. It's creating one. Here's what's really happening. Local governments in Tennessee rely heavily on property taxes. That's how counties fund schools, roads, emergency services, infrastructure. When you pay your property tax bill to your county trustee every year, that money stays local. It funds your community's actual needs. But there are proposals moving through the legislature to cap property tax growth at 2% per year. That sounds reasonable on the surface. Who wants their property taxes skyrocketing, right? But here's the reality with that. When you cap property tax, you don't cap government spending. You don't cap the cost of running schools. You don't cap the cost of maintaining roads. You don't cap salaries for administrators and bureaucrats. What you do is you force local governments to find other revenue sources. And those other revenue sources are going to cost you more money while giving you less say in how it's spent. This is called revenue shifting. And it's a tactic straight out of the leftist playbook. Create artificial constraints on visible taxes and then make up the difference through hidden taxes that people don't understand and can't easily track. Let me break down exactly how they're planning to make up this lost revenue. First, sales tax increases. Tennessee already has one of the highest sales tax rates in the country, averaging at 9.55%. It's way higher than anything in New York. I mean, I almost had a heart attack when I found out that you guys had tax on food down here. It doesn't make any sense to tax groceries. But looking at all of the laws and what the lawmakers are doing, it makes perfect sense now. Anyway, when property tax revenue gets capped, municipalities are going to push for local option sales tax increases. And unlike property taxes, which you pay once a year, and you could see clearly on the bill, sales taxes are invisible. You pay them in pennies every time you buy something. And most people never add up how much they're actually paying. The state is also proposing to expand sales tax to services. Right now, Tennessee doesn't tax most services, but there are bills being discussed to add sales tax to labor and services like home repairs, HVAC work, auto mechanics, landscaping, legal services, accounting. Think about what that means if you own land. You've got 40 acres. You need work done, fence repairs, well maintenance, equipment work, land clearing. All of that is services and labor. Under the new law proposals, you'd pay 7 to 9% sales tax on all of it. That's not a tax cut. That's shifting the tax burden from owning land to maintaining it. And it's going to cost you more because services and labors are ongoing expenses, while property taxes are fixed. Second, the wheel tax. This is the annual vehicle registration fee. Counties across Tennessee are already proposing increases to the wheel tax to make up for capped property tax growth. Instead of paying more on your land, you'll pay more for every vehicle you own. You own a truck for your land? That's going to cost more to register. Own a car for commuting? More. Own equipment vehicles? More. It all adds up. And unlike property taxes, which are based on value, wheel taxes hit everyone the same regardless of ability to pay. Third, development impact fees. If you ever want to build on your land, if you want to put up a barn or a shop or subdivide a portion for family, counties are jacking up impact fees. Some counties are proposing $7,500 per new structure to fund education debt and infrastructure. Those fees don't go away. They get passed on. If you're building, you pay directly. If you're buying, the seller passes it on to you in the price. If you're renting, the landlord passes it to you in rent. It's a hidden property tax that hits you at transaction time instead of annually. Fourth, and I think this is the big one we've already covered in detail, taxation by citation. Fines, fees, court costs, administrative charges. When local governments can't raise property taxes, they turn law enforcement into a revenue collection agency. This is exactly what's happening with the DUI law. Building jail wings for blood draws, creating mobile blood draw units, increasing the penalty for refusal from 1 year to 18 months, charging people for prescribed medication showing up on drug tests. Every arrest generates thousands of dollars in revenue. Court costs, lab fees, administrative fees, probation fees, ignition interlock fees. It all flows back to the local government and to private companies with government contracts. And here's the critical connection. This isn't separate from the property tax issue. It's part of the same revenue shifting strategy. Cap property taxes, make up the difference through fines and fees, turn every traffic stop into a potential revenue generator. Tennessee recently increased the victim's assistance assessment from $45 to $125. That's 175% of an increase in a single fee attached to criminal charges. That money goes straight to local government budgets. When you get pulled over and the officer decides to pursue a DUI investigation, when they force you to give blood and it shows your prescribed anxiety medication, when you get arrested and charged, you're not just facing criminal penalties, you're funding local government operations that can't raise property taxes anymore. You're the revenue source they're using to replace the property tax growth that they lost. Fifth, special assessment districts and utility fees. this is the sneakiest one. Cities are creating things like stormwater fees, street lighting fees. I already had one of those on my electric bill this past month. Sidewalk maintenance fees that show up on your monthly utility bill or as special assessments on your property. These aren't technically taxes, so they don't count against the 2% cap. But they function exactly like taxes. You pay them, the government collects them, they fund government operations. It's a tax by another name. All of this adds up to one simple truth. You're going to pay more, not less, more. The property tax you can see that you vote on through local elections, that stays in your community and funds services that you actually use. That's getting capped. And it's being replaced by a dozen different hidden taxes and fees that you can't track, can't vote on directly, and that often leave your community to fund state priorities or private companies. This is the shell game. Make it look like you're cutting taxes while you're actually shifting the burden to places where it's harder to see and harder to fight. And the politicians pushing this know exactly what they're doing. They're not stupid. They're not AOC. They're not Kamala Harris. These people are educated. They're not naive. They know that capping property taxes means shifting to other revenue sources. They know those other sources are more regressive, more hidden, and more profitable for government expansion. They're doing it anyway because it lets them campaign on being tax fighters while actually growing government and increasing the total tax burden on citizens. If that sounds like something Democrats would do, that's because it is. This is straight from the progressive playbook. Hide the true cost of government. Shift taxes to consumption and behavior. Make it impossible for citizens to track total tax burden. Grow government while claiming to limit it. And Tennessee Republicans are implementing it with enthusiasm. Let's talk about who's responsible for this shell game. The politicians who are pushing these revenue-shifting schemes while claiming to fight for lower taxes and limited government. The three names you need to know: Senator Bo Watson, Representative Gary Hicks, and Representative Ryan Williams. Senator Bo Watson is a Republican from Hickson. He chairs the Senate Finance, Ways and Means Committee. That means he oversees the entire state budget. He's the one who decides how much state surplus money gets sent back to counties to offset property tax relief. His office is in room 706 of the Cordell Hall building in Nashville. Phone number is 615-741-3227. Representative Gary Hicks is a Republican from Rogersville. He chairs the House Finance Ways and Means Committee. He manages the legislation that creates new revenue streams, taxes on goods and services, user fees, and all the hidden taxes that we're talking about. His office is also in the Cordell Hall building in Nashville. Phone number is 615-741-7480. Representative Ryan Williams is a Republican from Cookeville. He chairs the House Finance Subcommittee, which is often called the most powerful subcommittee in the legislature. They handle the granular details of where lost revenue gets clawed back from other sources. His office is, guess where it is? In the Cordell Hall building. The phone number is area code 615-741-1875. These three men control the purse strings for Tennessee. They're the ones designing the revenue shifting scheme. They're the ones who know exactly what's going to happen when property taxes get capped. And they're the ones pushing forward anyway. All Republicans, all claiming to support limited government and lower taxes, all governing like Democrats. Let's be very clear about what I mean by that. I don't mean that they're supporting abortion or gun control or any of the traditional Democrat positions. I mean they're using the same dishonest tactics that Democrats use to grow government while claiming to shrink it. Democrats love to hide the true cost of government. They love consumption taxes because they're less visible than income or property taxes. They love creating special fees and assessments that don't count as taxes for political purposes. They love making government dependent on volatile revenue sources like gambling or fines so they can claim they're not raising taxes on working families. That's exactly what these Tennessee Republicans are doing. Capping property taxes while expanding sales taxes, creating fee structures that generate revenue without technically being taxes, building systems like the DUI enforcement infrastructure that turn law enforcement into profit centers. It's dishonest. It's big government. It's the opposite of conservative principles. And it needs to be called out. Now, here's what makes this even more infuriating. These politicians aren't just shifting revenue. They're not using this as an opportunity to cut spending and shrink government. They're using the new revenue sources to expand bureaucracy and line pockets. Administrative growth in Tennessee's state and local government has been significant. Instead of the property tax caps leading to leaner, more efficient government, they're leading to the same size government funded through different, more regressive means. And where's that money going? Salary increases for administrators, expansion of bureaucracy, creation of new departments and positions, all while claiming they're protecting taxpayers. You know what actual limited government looks like? You cut the budget. You eliminate unnecessary positions. You streamline operations. You do more with less. You don't shift revenue sources and keep spending the same amount or more. But that's not what's happening. Because the goal was never to limit government. The goal was to create political cover for expanding government through less visible means. Let me give you the specific mechanism they're using to make counties dependent on the state. It's called the state to local revenue swap. Currently, the state keeps the majority of sales tax revenue. Counties get a portion back. The proposal is to increase the percentage that gets sent back to the counties to make up for the property tax caps. It sounds reasonable, right? The state's helping counties deal with lost revenue. Beautiful thing. Except Now your county is dependent on the state. If the state has a bad year, if sales tax revenue drops, your local school budget gets cut, your road maintenance gets cut, your emergency services get cut, because your county no longer has property tax as a stable, predictable revenue source that they control. This is the loss of local control. Your county becomes a middle manager for the state legislation. They implement what Nashville tells them to implement. They force what Nashville tells them to enforce. And if they don't, the state can threaten to reduce the revenue share. That's not limited government. That's centralization. That's concentrating power at the state level while pretending to give localities relief. And the politicians know this. They know that they're trading local independence for state control. They're doing it because it benefits them politically and financially. It gives the state legislature more power. It gives them more control over how money gets spent. It makes local officials dependent on state politicians for funding. It's empire building disguised as tax relief. These same politicians, Watson, Hicks, Williams, they're the ones who supported the DUI law. They're the ones who voted for the infrastructure spending to build jail wings and mobile blood draw units. They're the ones proposing to expand sales taxes to services. They're creating a system where ordinary people get squeezed from every direction. Higher sales taxes on everything you buy, higher fees on every interaction with government, higher costs for vehicle registration, higher impact fees for building, and law enforcement turned into a revenue generator that targets you for having prescribed medication in your system. All while your actual say in local government spending decreases because your county is dependent on state revenue sharing rather than local property taxes that you can vote on. This is Republican politicians acting like Democrats, growing government, centralizing power, using dishonest tactics to hide the true tax burden, creating systems that benefit bureaucrats and contractors at the expense of ordinary citizens. And I'm done pretending that's acceptable just because they have an R next to their name. If I wanted this kind of government, I'd vote Democrat. But I don't. You don't. You live here. People from other states that come here left their places because they don't want to vote for Democrats anymore. I want actual limited government, actual lower taxes, actual local control, transparency in how my money gets spent. And the property tax shell game these Republicans are running is the opposite of all of that. Let's get specific about what this revenue shifting scheme is going to cost you. Not in abstract policy terms, but in real dollars that come out of your pocket. Start with someone who owns 40 acres in Tennessee. Rural landowner. Maybe runs some cattle. Maybe just likes having space. Pays property taxes every year to the county trustee. Under the current system, that property tax is based on an assessed value. You know what you're going to pay. It's predictable. It funds local schools, roads, emergency services. You can vote for county commissioners who set the rate. You have direct democratic control over that tax. Now, Implement the 2% cap. Your property tax growth gets limited. Sounds good initially. Your bill isn't going up as much. But here's what actually happens to your total tax burden. The county passes a local option sales tax increase. Instead of 9% sales tax, it's now 10%. Every time you buy something, groceries, clothes, fuel, equipment, building materials, you're paying an extra percent in tax. Over the course of a year, that adds up. The average Tennessee household spends about $40,000 on taxable goods. An extra 1% is $400. That's probably more than you saved on property tax growth. But it gets worse. They expanded sales tax to services. Now, when you hire somebody to fix your fence, repair your well, service your equipment, you're paying sales tax on the labor. 7 to 9% on services that might run thousands of dollars per year. Got a tractor that needs work? $2,000 in labor and parts might cost you an extra $180 in sales tax that you didn't pay before. You need some HVAC work, plumbing, electrical. All of it's now taxable. Every service call, every repair, every bit of maintenance on your property that requires professional help is going to cost you more. Then the county raises the wheel tax. You've got a truck, maybe a farm vehicle, maybe a car for your spouse. Each one costs an extra $50 to $100 per year to register. It adds up. Let's do the math. The sales tax increase costs you $400. The service taxes cost you several hundred more, depending on what you need done. The wheel tax costs you another $100 or $200. You're easily paying $1,000 or more in new taxes and fees. And you've saved what on property tax? Maybe $200 or $300 from the growth being capped? You're paying more, significantly more. And you have less control over it because sales tax and wheel taxes and service taxes aren't as directly connected to local elected officials as property taxes are. Now let's talk about what happens if you have any interaction with law enforcement under this new system. You get pulled over, maybe speeding, maybe equipment violation. The officer decides to write you a ticket. Used to be that ticket was a fine plus a small court cost. And now it's a fine plus court cost plus the victim's assistant assessment, which just went from $45 to $125, plus administrative fees, plus technology fees, plus facility fees. A ticket that used to cost you $150 might now cost you $400. And that extra money is going directly to local government revenue to make up for capped property taxes. But let's say it gets worse. Let's say the officer suspects impairment. Maybe you're on prescribed medication. Maybe you're nervous and fumble for your license. Maybe you just seem off to the officer. They pursue a DUI investigation. You refuse the blood test because you're scared. They get a warrant and they forcibly extract your blood. It shows you're prescribed anti-anxiety medication. Now you're arrested. You post bail, several $1,000s. You hire an attorney, $20,000 or more. You pay the court costs and fees. You might lose your job. Even if you beat the charge, you've spent a fortune and you've got an arrest on your record. All of that is revenue for the system. The bail, the fees, the court costs. Even your attorney's fees generate economic activity that the state benefits from through various taxes. You've become a revenue source to replace the property tax growth the county can't collect anymore. Now multiply this across thousands of Tennesseans. Every traffic stop becomes a revenue opportunity. Every DUI investigation generates thousands in fees. Every court interaction adds administrative costs that fund government operations. This is taxation by citation. And it's going to get worse as property tax cap force local government to find revenue elsewhere. Let's talk about the sports betting revenue they're planning to use. Tennessee is generating over $350 million from sports betting. There's a specific bill to divert 90% of that to counties to offset property tax relief. So your local government is now funded by gambling. What happens when betting drops? When people stop gambling as much, or when the initial novelty wears off and revenue decreases? Your county budget takes a hit. They cut services, or they find new revenue sources. Maybe they increase the fines. Maybe they get more aggressive with DUI enforcement. Maybe they add new fees. Gambling revenue is unstable. It's volatile. It's... What am I looking for? It's not a replacement for stable tax base like property taxes are. But they're using it anyway because it lets them claim that they're offsetting the property tax caps without raising other taxes until the gambling revenue drops. Then they raise other taxes. And now you're stuck with both the gambling dependency and the higher taxes. Here's the reserve fund argument. Tennessee has a $2 billion rainy day fund. Politicians point to this and say we can use reserves to help counties transition. Tennessee's total annual budget is over $52 billion. That $2 billion sounds like a lot, but it's less than 4% of the annual budget. If you tried to use that fund, or if you tried to use that to fund county operations to replace property tax revenue, it would be gone in weeks. The reserve fund is a Band-Aid. It's not a solution. It's certainly not a long-term replacement for the stable, predictable property tax revenue that funds local services. But politicians use it to make the shell game sound reasonable. Don't worry, we have reserves. Until the reserves run out, then what? Then you're stuck with the new tax structure permanently. The expanded sales tax, the wheel taxes, the service taxes, the taxation by citation. All of it becomes the new normal. And there's no going back because the property tax system has been gutted. This is what happens when you let politicians play shell games with your money. They promise relief in one area while increasing costs in 5 others. They claim to be limiting government while actually expanding it. They use reserves and gambling and volatile revenue sources to make the math work temporarily, and then stick you with the bill permanently when those sources dry up. And you know who benefits from all of this? Not you. Not ordinary Tennesseans trying to live their lives and manage their property and provide for their families. The bureaucrats benefit. The administrators who get raises funded by the new fee structures. The private companies that get government contracts for things like ignition interlock devices and blood testing services. The politicians who get to campaign on being tax fighters while actually expanding government revenue. Everybody wins except for you. That's the real cost of this shell game. Not just the money, though that's significant. It's the loss of transparency, the loss of control, the loss of stable, predictable governance that you can actually influence through the local elections. You're getting played. And the people playing you are Republicans who are supposed to know better. The good news is this isn't over. The property tax amendment is headed to the ballot in November 2026, and you can vote no. You can stop this shell game before it becomes permanent in our Constitution. But you need to understand how Tennessee's amendment process works, because there's a specific trap that actually works in our favor if we organize properly. For a constitutional amendment to pass in Tennessee, it must receive a majority of the votes cast for governor. Not a majority of the votes cast on the amendment itself. A majority of votes for governor. Here's what that means practically. If 1 million people vote for governor, but only 400,000 people vote yes on the amendment fails. Even if those 400,000 yes votes were the only votes cast on the amendment question. This is huge. It means low turnout on the amendment helps defeat it. It means we don't need to get more no votes than yes votes. We just need to keep the yes votes below half of the total governor votes. The strategy is education. Make sure that the people understand what this amendment actually does. Make sure they understand the revenue shifting scheme it enables. Make sure they know they're not voting to ban an existing tax. They're voting to enable a shell game that'll cost them more money. A lot of voters will see ban property tax and think it sounds good, or without understanding the implications. Our job is to educate them before they vote. Here are the key talking points you need to use when you're talking to neighbors, friends, family, anyone who will listen. First, it's a solution for a problem that we don't have. Tennessee hasn't had a state property tax since 1949. This amendment is political theater. We don't need it in our Constitution. Second, watch the fees. When property taxes get capped, governments make up revenue through fines, fees, and court costs. It turns law enforcement into a revenue collection. That's what's happening with the DUI law, and it'll get worse if this passes. Third, the sales tax trap. Tennessee already has one of the highest sales tax rates in the country. If this amendment sets up sales tax increases and expansions to services that'll cost you more than you save on property taxes. Fourth, loss of local control. Your county becomes dependent on the state for revenue. instead of controlling its own property tax base. That means that Nashville controls your local government instead of your elected county commissioners. Write letters to the editor of your local newspaper. Use the template I'm about to give you, or write your own. But get your voice out there. Local newspapers are still influential in rural Tennessee. And a well-written letter can reach thousands of voters. Here's a sample. Subject: don't be fooled by the property tax ban. To the editor, we're being told that SJR1 is a tax cut, but for those of us who own land in Tennessee, it's a shell game. This amendment to ban a state property tax, which hasn't existed since 1949. It's a distraction from the real threat, how our local counties will make up lost revenue. When the state caps our local officials' ability to manage property taxes, those officials don't stop spending. Instead, they turn to hidden taxes. They hike our sales taxes, increase car registration fees, and jack up administrative fees on every citation and court case. As a landowner, I know that reserves won't pave our roads or run our schools. If we ban the state's ability to manage property taxes, we're inviting them to tax our labor, our services, and our movement instead. We're trading a visible tax for a dozen invisible ones that line the pockets of a growing bureaucracy. I'm voting no on the property tax amendment this November to keep our taxes transparent and our local control intact. I urge my neighbors to do the same. Sincerely, your name and county. Contact your county trustee. These are the people who actually collect property taxes and manage local revenue. They know better than anyone what's going to happen when the property taxes get capped. Ask them these questions. What is the projected increase in litigation taxes and administrative fees for our county if the property tax growth cap is passed? Is the county considering raising the wheel tax or hotel tax to offset state mandated property tax freezes? How much of our local revenue is now coming from state shared funding versus our local taxes? Their answers will tell you how much independence your county has already lost and how much more they're planning to lose. You can find county trustee contact information through the UT County Technical Assistance Service Directory. Every county has one, and they're public officials who have to answer the constituents. Organize with opposition groups. The Tennessee Municipal League and the Tennessee County Services Association often quietly oppose these caps because they know it'll bankrupt local services. They're not going to be vocal about it, but they're sources of information, and they can connect you with local officials who understand the problem. State Senator Heidi Campbell, a Democrat from Nashville, has been vocal in opposing this amendment. I don't agree with her on most of her issues, but on this one, she is 100% right. She argues this belongs in regular statute law than the Constitution, and that it threatens financial stability. Reach out to her office. Get information. Build a coalition. This should be a bipartisan fight because it affects everyone, regardless of politics. Contact the Finance Committee chairs, Watson, Hicks, and Williams. Tell them you oppose service tax expansions. Tell them you oppose fee hikes to make up for property tax caps. Tell them you expect them to cut spending instead of shifting revenue sources. Make it clear you're watching how they vote. Make it clear there will be consequences if they keep pushing this scheme. And here's the hard part. Be willing to primary them if necessary. I know they're Republicans. I know the alternative might be worse on other issues. But if Republicans won't govern like conservatives, if they're going to grow government and raise taxes through dishonest means, what's the point of electing them? Primary challenges are how you enforce accountability within your own party. Find candidates who actually believe in limited government and ones that will fight for it. Support them, vote for them, replace the Republicans who are governing like Democrats. Important dates for voting. The voter registration deadline is Monday, October 5th, 2026. Make sure that you're registered. Early voting runs October 14th through October 29th. Use it. Avoid the lines and make sure your vote gets counted. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd, 2026. Mark your calendar. Make a plan. Vote no on the property tax amendment. And bring friends. Bring families. Bring neighbors. Education and turnout is how we win this. The politicians have already passed this amendment through 2 legislative sessions. They've done their part. Now it's up to voters to kill it at the ballot box. We can do this, but only if we organize, educate, and vote. And if you know somebody that's not registered to vote, get them registered. It's so easy. I want to be very clear about something. I'm not anti-Republican. I'm not giving up on conservative governance. I'm not switching parties or suddenly thinking Democrats have better answers. I'm holding Republicans accountable for betraying the principles they claim to represent. Limited government means limiting government, not shifting it around and hiding the growth through dishonest revenue schemes. Lower taxes means actually lowering the total tax burden, not capping one tax while raising 5 others. Local control means letting communities govern themselves, not making them dependent on state revenue sharing and Nashville politicians. These are conservative principles, real ones, not the fake limited government rhetoric that politicians use to get elected while they grow bureaucracy and expand state power. Tennessee Republicans are failing on these principles. The property tax shell game proves it. The DUI law proves it. The revenue shifting scheme proves it. And I'm done making excuses for them. If we wanted big government, hidden taxes, law enforcement as revenue collection, and centralized state control, we'd vote for Democrats. But we don't. We vote Republican because we expect better. It's time we start demanding it. Vote no on the property tax amendment. Contact your legislators. Primary the ones who won't listen. Replace them with people who actually believe in the principles they campaign on. This fight isn't about partisan politics. It's about whether we're going to have honest, limited government, or whether we're going to let politicians play shell games with our money while they line their pockets and expand their power. I know what side I'm on, and I hope you do too. Now, before we close, check out everything happening at Truth in the Darkness. Visit titdusa.com for bold political commentary that holds everyone accountable, Republicans and Democrats alike, when they betray conservative principles. We've got daily devotionals, investigative true crime, and Bible teaching that doesn't compromise. Support independent media that tells the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Check out our merchandise and become part of a community that refuses to accept dishonest governance from anyone. In the book of Proverbs, chapter 11, verse 1, a false balance is an abomination to the Lord, but a just weight is his delight. These politicians are using false balances. They're telling you they're cutting taxes while they're actually shifting and increasing them. They're claiming to limit government. Well, they're actually expanding it. They're using dishonest weights and measures to deceive voters. God hates that, and so should we. Demand just weights. Demand honest governance. Demand that the politicians you elect actually do what they promise. And if they won't, replace them with people who will. Vote no in November. Fight back now. Save Tennessee from this shell game before it's too late. And I'll see you next time.